Hey guys, Drifter here. Today I've got an absolutely crazy commentary for you about the Mandela Effect. It started off as a normal psychological, higher topic commentary and delved into the crazy really fast. The gameplay you're going to get to see is Modern Warfare Remastered, just a smattering of some interesting clips, and then me playing the way I kind of like to play on Daybreak against a pretty good team too. I perform well, but it is a bit of a struggle, and not just a stomp like you normally see. So this was a fan-recommended topic that I've had requested by several fans for some time now, and I just kind of got around to it. The original idea was to do it based on the psychological principle of the Mandela Effect, which is a real thing, but I kind of got sucked into the crazy side of the Mandela Effect as well, the conspiracy theory Illuminati side, which we'll talk about at the end of the video. So the best way to explain the psychological principle would be this. Where were you when 9/11 happened? Just think for a moment, where were you when you first heard the news about 9/11? Okay, you've got that idea in your head. Now, where were you when Nelson Mandela died? You're probably not coming up with something very specific about this, as the majority of you are going to be from the US, Canada, and United Kingdom. I know I have some South African fans, and many people will remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, but that's not true. He actually died in 2013 after being released from prison, and an abnormal amount of people remembered him already being dead before he really died. Like, a scary number of people. They all thought that he died in prison, and you're going to say, well, then why in the world did everybody think Nelson Mandela died? Well, I can do some other examples for you. Where were you when you heard that Jimmy Carter died? Jimmy Carter's still alive. Those of you that are starting to come up with things. Jimmy Carter's still alive, not particularly well, but he's still kicking. You can do the same kind of thing, and it'll explain it a little bit better. Where were you when you heard that Stephen Hawking died? Well, no, Stephen Hawking's still alive, but he is in incredibly poor health and has outlived every single person with his condition by maybe plus 40 years. He should have died an incredibly long time ago, and all of these things are basically false memories, but they're being created in a strange kind of way, a reverse sort of way. And you can see some common threads in these people. They're all old, they're unhealthy or imprisoned, and they were important to the past generation of people, maybe excepting Stephen Hawking. They're not currently politically relevant, important, active, making their big discoveries, doing things. And most importantly, they were old even in old videos. So when you were a kid growing up and you were seeing videos of Jimmy Carter, you knew that he was old even in the 1970s and 80s, and he's much older today. You may have assumed that they died recently, or maybe a little while back, but surely you thought that they were on their way out, at least several times. If you read about these people or saw them in videos or on TV in the last, 10 years, you would say, oh, well, they're already past 80 and they're either unhealthy or in a stressful environment. Surely they may have gone recently or will be going soon, and you've thought this so many times, you've prepared for the loss so well, but it just kind of didn't happen, and maybe you over-prepared for it so that it felt like it already happened to you. It is essentially a false memory, which is a very real thing, and that's a very scary thing to some people, to think that their memories are fallible, but false memories are a real thing because our human brains are fallible. Our biology is subject to not being perfect at any given time, and our brains use a number of heuristics and unusual mechanisms to do things that we assume are much more concrete. False memories or false testimony screws up a lot of court cases and is given a little bit too much credit, in my personal opinion, because when you create a memory, it's in bits and pieces, and they're not whole, and they're not one single continuous thing like a movie or like a picture. You remember parts of the picture, or if it's an event, you remember one particular moment or a couple of snapshots from the event. You remember a couple of phrases, with just a few key anchoring points that were important to you at the time, and maybe the rest of it will be stored in a more factual manner. This is, of course, accepting people that have photographic or a truly exceptional memory. For the 99% of the rest of us, that's how it works. When you recall that memory, you're not recalling the entire event like a security camera. You're recalling your, handful of anchor points, how it smelled, how this person looked, the key things they said, and then your factual bits, and you fill it all in, and then you pull in accessory information from elsewhere, and you have to recreate the memory a little bit. This is why when a group of people witness an event, all 3 or 4 of them them can tell a slightly different story because they're filling in those bits differently. It's often logical and it often is quite accurate, but it's not a true perfect memory. What's most interesting about this is that the memories can be changed by language association, depending on how you ask a question. The example that I was reading over was car crashes. Be like, how fast was the car going during the collision versus how fast was the car going when it smashed into the other car. When you use the word smashed, people will recall the speeds being higher and the wreck being more violent than it really was and more brutal. It can also be associated by the environment, either in which the event took place, or the recall environment can prep people for a more comfortable sort of recall. You see this a lot with events like auto shows or big ones, video gaming and trade events, pretty much, or movie premieres, any sort of big premiere. They put a lot of work into making the environment incredibly pleasant so that when people recall whatever it is that they witnessed for the reveal, it's associated with that pleasantness. And it can also be screwed up by other testimony. That's why jurors are not allowed to read press releases or watch the news or be influenced by the media, because people's memories will actually change based on what other people say because they assume they might have forgot something or there's details missing, and we just kind of like to agree as a species. And finally, every time you recall a memory and you fill in those little gaps and you tell your story, or even if you're just thinking about it to yourself, and then you let it go and sink out of your consciousness, the way you recalled it and the way you filled in those gaps ultimately does change the memory. And you can see this in the way of, have you ever heard somebody, their story changes every time they tell it, not because they're lying, but because they saved a store from getting robbed and there were 3 or 4 bad guys, and then there were 5, and then there were 6 of them, and then it was a whole gang. Or a hunter that was killing his prized deer or bear, it was a such and such point buck, and then it was more and bigger, and then the bear was bigger and more dangerous. And every time they tell this story, it gets a little bit more extreme. That happens with almost everything, and it's a false memory, which is what the Mandela Effect is psychologically. It's false memories, but instead of you remembering something happening and then misremembering it later for a variety of reasons, you have the expectation of something happened or that it already did happen, and you kind of mentally process it, and then when you recall it later, it's embarrassing to find out such thing never happened. But this is where it gets crazy. This is where we're going off the rails in this commentary. The Mandela Effect also encompasses this crazy conspiracy theory about parallel universes and mind control and the Illuminati and all other such crazy things. And the way I like to explain it is to start with the Berenstain Bears. And I'm pronouncing it strange on purpose because apparently the book series that we all know and love is known as the Berenstain Bears, S-T-A-I-N. But I, honest to God, not just bullshit for this video, remember it as a kid as the Berenstain Bears, E-I-N, spelled completely differently. And when I saw this, the Berenstain versus Berenstain Bears, it's presented as, if you remember the bears being not the Berenstain, but the Berenstain, then you're from an alternate universe where the book series was different. This was incredibly upsetting to me because I've read hundreds of those books as a child, and surely I would remember what the bears' names were. They were the Berenstain Bears when I was growing up. This tripped me out endlessly. I ended up staring at it for hours trying to figure out what was wrong with my brain. My brother has the same issue. He worked in a library. He loves reading. His goal in life is to be a librarian of sorts, and he remembers them being differently, not only when he read them as a child, which it's easy to misremember things as a kid, but recommending them to other children as an adult, it was still wrong. Here's another one. You can do Shazam versus Kazam. Shazam being this movie with Sinbad starring as a genie, and Kazam being a movie with Shaquille O'Neal starring as a genie. Now, the Shaquille O'Neal movie is real, but Shazam never happened. Honest to God, though, I remember a movie called Shazam and Kazam. I remember both of these. I remember Kazam. I remember the kid wished for the Big Macs a mile high. He was an idiot. He had wasted his wishes completely. And Shazam was kind of like the Sinbad, like, great value knockoff made for TV version of it. But apparently that movie never happened. And it really bothers me that I remember these things clearly and they didn't happen. I'm going to go over a couple of other random examples here. Some people get concerned about Captain Crunch versus Captain Crunch with the little apostrophe N. The people complain about logos changing over time. There's a common Bible quote, Isaiah 11:16, which I've read the Bible many times, and I remember it as being when the lion and the lamb lay down together, but apparently it's when the wolf and the lamb lay down together. That confuses me a lot. There's the spelling of people's names, Katy Perry versus Katy Perry, Hillary Clinton with or without 2 L's, and some confusing things like that. But ultimately, these are false memories. These are not remembering a complicated book name when you were a kid, or conflating similar looking actors with just Shazam and Kazam, and brand associations that you often skim and don't truly read. But other people believe that they are evidence of a universe merge, or their leftover memories from the other universe, often called residue, or sometimes the evidence is called residue. And if your memories are different, if you saw the Berenstain Bears, not the Berenstain Bears, then you're actually from a different timeline, from a different universe where these things were real, and you don't belong here. Or at least that's what they say. I think that is far less probable than just having bad memories, but it goes to show you how far people will go to justify the things that they believe in. And if you want to go further down this conspiracy theory train, it'll take you into places like astral projections in the astral plane, which is not true. I've had a lot of fans ask me if that's like a real thing. There's some wonky multiverse theories, often based on what you see on TV or comic books. There's the theory that the Illuminati has been time traveling to alter the events of history to suit their needs, and we only notice the small things for whatever reason. Mind control, aliens manipulating us, a lot of crazy, crazy things. But at the end of the day, it's just plain old bad memories. So if you have a takeaway from this commentary, just remember that you and your brain and our human biology is fallible, and to double check yourself on occasion. Guys, that's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something useful. And if you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.